My name is Lily Thorne. I was 17 years old when my world fractured into a million pieces. The first crack appeared when the boy I believed was my future walked away from me without a single glance back. The second, deeper crack came when my own parents told me to pack my bags and leave our home. There were no goodbyes, no tearful hugs, no promises of a second chance. There was just the cold, final sound of the front door closing behind me in the middle of a brutal January night. It had all started the way so many high school stories do. Carter was the golden boy, the captain of the varsity soccer team. He was charming with an easy smile, and he always seemed to have a plan for everything. And me? I was quiet. I was a straight-A student who preferred to be alone, sketching in the margins of my notebooks and dreaming about a life that felt a little more alive than the one I had. With Carter, for the first time, it felt like someone finally saw me. He saw past the quiet girl and into the person I wanted to become. We would talk for hours about our dreams, about getting a tiny apartment together downtown after graduation, one with terrible plumbing but big windows that would let in all the morning light. We imagined opening a small cafe where I would design the menu and he would charm the customers with his easy laughter. We believed in each other's dreams like they were gospel. We were convinced that we were different from everyone else. But that kind of belief doesn't always last. Before I begin telling you my story, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. By the time summer blurred into a cold, crisp fall, Carter had changed. His text messages got shorter. The comfortable silences between us became awkward and long. He stopped talking about our little downtown cafe and started talking about Stanford Law School and high-powered internships in New York City. He was already building a new future for himself, a future that didn't include me. And then one afternoon in October, just as the leaves were beginning to burn red and gold, he told me it was over. Just like that. There was no argument, no tears, just his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, and a voice that didn't shake when he said, This isn't working anymore. He walked away, and I just stood there, frozen on the park path, my scarf twisting in the sharp wind. I didn't chase him, I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't know then that the heartbreak was only the first storm I would have to face. Carter and I had met during our sophomore year. It wasn't love at first sight, not really. He had borrowed my favorite pen in history class one day and, in typical Carter fashion, forgot to give it back. That was the beginning of our story. From there, it became late-night phone calls, long walks home from school, and dreams stitched together over milkshakes at the old local diner. We were so young, but we spoke about our future as if we had already lived a full life. I still remember the way he would lean across the diner table, his eyes full of excitement, saying things like, "You and me, Lily, we're going to make it big. We'll be different. Screw the rules." And I believed him with every part of my being. I used to write his name in the corners of my sketchbook, surrounded by little doodles of coffee mugs, apartment windows, and all the small things we said we would share. It was foolish, maybe, but at the time it felt so incredibly real. After we graduated, something inside of him shifted. He began pulling away from me slowly, like a tide retreating from the shore. Our phone calls dropped from hours to mere minutes. His attention would wander during our conversations, and every time I asked if something was wrong, he would brush it off with a quick, dismissive, "I'm just busy, Lily." But busy began to look a lot like disappearing. One day, I waited for him for over an hour outside the library where he always used to meet me. He never showed up. No text, no excuse. That's when I knew with a terrible certainty that I wasn't a part of his future anymore. A week later, we met at the park. It was the same spot where we'd shared our first kiss, back when everything felt simple and certain. I had foolishly thought that maybe if we talked, I could remind him of everything we had built together. Instead, he ended it all. "I have to focus on school," he said, not even making eye contact with me. "You deserve someone who's all in, and right now, that's just not me." I don't remember what I said in return. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. I think the sound of my heart breaking was too loud for me to hear my own voice. After he left, I sat alone on the cold bench for what felt like an eternity, watching the wind toss the autumn leaves, listening to the sounds of a world that didn't stop just because mine had shattered. The loss of him was sharp and painful, but it wasn't the worst part. That came later, much later, when I finally realized that I wasn't just heartbroken. I was pregnant. And Carter, I knew, would never know. Or care. The signs had been there all along, subtle at first. I was constantly tired. The smell of coffee, my favorite thing in the world, now made me feel sick to my stomach. And my favorite pair of jeans suddenly didn't zip up the way they used to. Still, I desperately told myself it was just stress. Maybe hormones, maybe anything but what I truly feared it might be. But fear has a way of sitting in your gut and growing until it finally demands to be heard. One Friday after school, I stopped by the local pharmacy, 2 blocks from my house. I remember how the fluorescent lights buzzed loudly over my head as I stood frozen in front of the aisle, staring at the pregnancy tests as if they might vanish if I blinked. I picked the cheapest one, stuffed it into my coat sleeve, and paid in cash. At home, I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom, the one with the chipped tile floor and the mirror that always fogged up too quickly. I followed the instructions, with trembling hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. 2 bright pink lines. That's all it took to change absolutely everything. I sat on the edge of the tub for a long, long time, holding the small plastic stick in my lap, hoping that it might somehow tell me what to do next. My thoughts were a panicked race. Would Carter come back if he knew? Could I hide this from my parents? Could I even do this alone? That night at dinner, the table was set just like any other night. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. My dad was reading the local paper while my mom hummed a quiet tune to herself in the kitchen. On the surface, everything looked normal. But inside me, a terrible storm was building. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My father looked up from his paper, adjusting his glasses. My mom stopped in the middle of the kitchen, casserole dish in hand. I stood there, unable to sit down, unable to breathe. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was total. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Then came the shouting, the shaking chairs. The shock quickly melted into a burning fury. "You've disgraced this family," my mother hissed, her face twisted in a way I had never seen before. "You are not raising a baby under my roof," my father said, his voice like ice cracking under too much weight. "Pack your things. You're out." I begged. I cried. I tried to explain, to reason with them, but it didn't matter. Their minds were already made up. By the time I closed my bedroom door that night, I knew I had to leave, and I had absolutely nowhere to go. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands still shaking as I zipped up an old duffel bag I hadn't used since summer camp in 7th grade. Inside, I stuffed 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans, a toothbrush, and the only photo I had of me and Carter, a blurry picture taken at the county fair when things still felt like forever. I hesitated for a long time before sliding it into the side pocket of the bag. Let it be a reminder, I thought, of what trust can truly cost. The house was quiet now. My mom was still downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table with her face in her hands. My dad had slammed the garage door shut and was now gone. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't expect them to stop me. I just stood in the doorway and whispered, "I'm leaving." My mom looked up, her eyes red and rimmed with what looked like a flicker of guilt. "Lily, please just think about this." "I did," I said, tightening my grip on the bag. "And you made it clear. I'm not welcome." Here, outside, the brutal January air bit at my skin. Snow crunched loudly under my sneakers as I stood on the sidewalk, blinking back tears that immediately froze on my cheeks. I had no plan, no money, no Carter, and now no home. But there was one name echoing in the back of my mind, a name that felt like a warm, familiar blanket. Grandma Helen. She lived in Willow Creek, a quiet, small town about 2 hours away by bus. I hadn't seen her since Christmas, but she had always told me, "If you ever need me, sweetheart, you call. I don't care what time it is." With numb fingers, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to her number. It rang once, then twice, then her warm, familiar voice came through the line. "Hello?" "Grandma," I croaked out, my throat tight with emotion. "It's me. I Need to come stay with you? Can I come now? There was a pause. I could hear the sound of her shifting in her old rocking chair. Of course you can, sweetheart, she said without a moment's hesitation. Get here safe. I'll put the kettle on. That's all it took. No questions, no judgment, just pure, unconditional love. I wiped my face, turned toward the bus stop at the end of the street, and started walking. I didn't know what waited for me in Willow Creek, but I knew who would be there waiting for me. And right now, that was more than enough. The Greyhound pulled into the empty station in Willow Creek just after midnight. The station was quiet, lit only by a few flickering street lamps and the soft, humming glow of a vending machine. I stepped off the bus, my duffel bag feeling heavy on my shoulder, my feet crunching loudly over the frost. My breath fogged in the cold air, and my heartbeat a frantic rhythm in my ears. Grandma Helen's house was only 3 blocks away. I had walked that exact path so many times as a child, clutching her hand, swinging it back and forth as if I didn't have a single care in the world. Now I wrapped my arms around my stomach, protecting my baby, and moved through the darkness like someone chasing a fading memory. Her porch light was on. That old porch had sagged for as long as I could remember, but it was always swept clean. A row of little ceramic frogs still lined the steps, one of them missing an eye. Before I could even knock, the front door swung open. There she was. Grandma Helen wore a faded robe with tiny blue flowers and thick wool socks that barely clung to her slippers. Her silver hair was piled into a messy bun, and her sharp gray eyes softened the moment they met mine. She didn't say a word at first. She just opened her arms wide. I collapsed into them, the smell of cinnamon and old books wrapped around me as she held me tight. Her frame was smaller than I remembered, but her hug still felt like armor, a strong, safe shield against the world. Come inside, sweetheart, she murmured. Let's get you warm. The inside of her house hadn't changed at all. The same plaid couch sagged comfortably in the middle. The same chipped teacups still lined the windowsill. A radio played soft jazz from the corner, the kind of music she always said made the house breathe. She handed me a mug of chamomile tea and a plate of leftover sandwiches, thick slices of bread with meatloaf and a small smear of ketchup. I didn't even realize how hungry I was until I took the first bite. We sat in silence for a while. The warmth of the tea seeped into my numb fingers. The tight knot of fear in my chest slowly began to loosen. Then, I broke. I messed up, Grandma, I whispered, tears finally streaming down my cheeks. Mom and Dad said I've disgraced them, that I ruined everything. I looked up, my eyes full of fear and pain. I'm pregnant. I'm so scared, and I'm all alone. Grandma Helen didn't flinch. She leaned back in her chair, took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, and then set it down with quiet resolve. A child isn't a disgrace, Lily, she said firmly, her eyes holding mine. It's a beginning, sometimes a hard one, but it is still a beautiful beginning. And just like that, something inside me shifted. Maybe I wasn't broken after all. Maybe I was just starting over. The days that followed were quiet, wrapped in slow routines and the steady hum of healing. Grandma Helen didn't ask questions. She didn't push or pry, she just made space for me, space to sleep, space to eat. Space to cry when the weight of it all became too heavy to hold inside. Every morning we had tea together. She liked her chamomile strong with a splash of honey and exactly 2 crackers on the side. I liked mine a little lighter, but I never told her that. It felt like a small tradition that I didn't want to break. By mid-February, the garden out back, just a patch of frost-covered soil, started showing tiny, persistent signs of life. Grandma Helen said that winter roses were stubborn things. They bloom when everything else gives up, she'd chuckle, kneeling down to check their progress. Remind you of anyone? Sometimes I helped her prune the dead branches or dust off her huge collection of teacups. Other times, I would simply curl up on the old sagging couch with a blanket pulled tight and the radio whispering soft jazz in the background, sketching whatever came to mind. I had started drawing again, Not because I wanted to create something perfect, but because it helped me breathe. At night, I wrote in a little notebook I found tucked in the back of a drawer. I didn't write about Carter or my parents. I wrote about my fear, about small victories, about the baby growing inside me, and about what kind of life I wanted for us both. You don't have to be perfect, Grandma Helen would say to me when she saw me staring out the window for too long. You just have to keep going. And I did. I got a part-time job at the local bakery downtown, just a few shifts a week. The owner, a kind woman named Mrs. Albright, never asked about my growing belly or my past. She just taught me how to frost cupcakes and made sure I ate a warm lunch every day. It wasn't easy. Some nights I still cried myself to sleep. Some mornings the fear came roaring back. But I was safe. I was growing. And for the first time in weeks, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could do this. The day it happened was heavy with heat. Mid-August in Willow Creek could press against your skin like a warm, humid breath. And that Tuesday morning was no different. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a chipped plate, when a sharp pain sliced through my back and settled low in my belly. My hands froze in the water. A second later, I felt the unmistakable warmth of my water breaking. "Grandma?" I called out, my voice tight with panic. Grandma Helen appeared within seconds, her robe tied loosely, car keys already in hand. "Let's go, sweetheart," she said, not even stopping to put on her shoes. "We've got a little one waiting to meet us." The drive to Riverbend Memorial Hospital was a painful blur of contractions and deep breaths. I clutched her hand the entire way, my forehead pressed against the cool glass of the window. She didn't say much, just whispered small comforts like prayers, like anchors. In the delivery room, time folded in on itself. The pain came in waves, each one stronger than the last, and I screamed until my throat went raw. Nurses moved around us in a quiet, practiced rhythm, but all I could focus on was Grandma Helen's hand on my shoulder and her soft voice in my ear. "You're doing just fine, Lily. Just breathe. You're almost there." And then he came. A tiny, squalling miracle, covered in warmth and life and everything I didn't even know I needed. He had a full head of dark hair, scrunched eyes, and fists that were curled tightly as if he was already ready to fight the world. They laid him on my chest and everything in the world stopped. I looked down at him and whispered, "Leo." It was the name I had written in my little notebook over and over. It meant lion, but to me it meant something else entirely. It meant home. I looked over at Grandma Helen, and for the first time in months she was crying, happy tears. And in that moment, in that hospital room with its peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights, I knew I wasn't just a scared girl anymore. I was a mother. 2 decades passed by like seasons do. Quietly, steadily, and then all at once. Willow Creek became home in every sense of the word. I never left. I turned my part-time job at the local bakery into a business of my own. The Willow, hearth, named for the warmth I wanted every customer to feel walking through my door. Leo grew up with flour on his cheeks and the scent of cinnamon in his backpack. He was accepted into a prestigious scholarship program to study architecture in the city, just as I had once dreamed of for myself. He still came home every Sunday, for dinner. One rainy afternoon in October, 20 years to the month that Carter had left me, I heard a quiet knock on the door. When I opened it, I didn't expect to see my parents. They looked older, smaller somehow. My mother's hands trembled around a faded umbrella. My father's voice cracked when he asked, "Is this a bad time?" I stood there in the doorway. Beside me stood my son, Leo, tall and strong, with his father's chin and my eyes. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. Instead, I turned to my son and said gently, "Leo, these are your grandparents. They've come a long way. Maybe they have something to say." And for the first time in my life, I let the silence do the speaking. Some wounds never fully heal. But some hearts, given the right amount of time and love, grow anyway. I hadn't rebuilt my life to prove anything to the people who had left me behind. I rebuilt it so I could live fully, honestly, and without shame. When my parents sat at my table that evening, sipping tea from the chipped cups Grandma Helen had once collected, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore, not because they deserved my forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. Grandma Helen had passed away 5 years ago. She never got to meet Leo as a grown man. She never saw my little bakery expand. She never got to sit on the beautiful porch swing we rebuilt in her honor. But she gave me something far more lasting than just advice or shelter. She gave me a strong foundation, a chance to grow my roots deep in the very soil where I'd once felt completely discarded. And now, when other women walk into my bakery with tired eyes or trembling hands, I always smile at them, the same way she used to smile at me and say, "You're safe here." Because sometimes, revenge isn't about fighting back. It's about rising gently, quietly, and showing the world that you bloomed anyway. If this story has stayed with you, I hope you'll share it, leave a comment, or simply remember that your beginning might not have been easy, but it is still yours. And that, I've learned, is all that truly matters.